Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us to talk about details and nuance and their importance in diplomacy. We are, of course, talking about the book Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You. That was written by Ambassador Capricia Marshall. Ambassador Marshall served as White House Social Secretary in the Clinton administration from 1997 to 2001 and United States Chief of Protocol in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2013. In her post, she enhanced traditional protocol methods with her new tools to build relationships between dignitaries and industry leaders worldwide. She oversaw the diplomatic details of multiple state visits, G20 and G8 convenings and summits such as the Nuclear Security Summit, APEC, NATO, and Sunderland Summit. She will be speaking, of course, to Ambassador Martha Barcena, who's the ambassador of Mexico to the United States. Ambassador Barcena was appointed by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and ratified by the Mexican Senate on December of 2018. And we are very proud to have her be the first female ambassador to hold this post. Ambassador Barcena joined the Mexican Foreign Service in 1979. Prior to arriving in Washington, D.C., she was posted as permanent representative to the United Nations Rome-based agencies. She has also served as ambassador to the Republic of Turkey, non-resident to Georgia, and the republics of Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, as well as ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark, non-resident to the Kingdom of Norway and the Republic of Iceland, and as consul in Barcelona. Let me not delay this any longer. I'm sure they're going to have a wonderful conversation about their shared experiences in the diplomatic world.
Thank you very much, Ishnik. Capricia, Ambassador Penavic Marshall, it's really an honor to have you here with us today. And I cannot tell the audience how pleased I am, not just to have a great diplomat woman with such a distinguished career, but a very good friend of mine, and also an ambassador who has Mexican roots, Mexican origins, that we will talk about it. It's really, Capricia is the embodiment of a first generation migrant, that what you can get when you are an accomplished and dedicated and talented woman. Ambassador Marshall, Ambassador Capricia played a fundamental role both in the Clinton and the Obama administrations, literally facilitating history as a social secretary and the chief of protocol. She has now put all her accumulated experience in this wonderful book that you can see, Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy. And as you can see, I have it marked. So, and I'm sure this book will become compulsory reading for everyone in politics, international relations, and diplomacy. But also for those interested in the complexity of human and cultural interactions, which is something that she underlines all the time in her book. As a career diplomat myself, I am delighted to have found a soulmate that wrote a book that explains to wider audiences the relevance of protocol and why protocol is so important in diplomacy. Because nowadays, people think that protocol is not needed anymore, or that maybe the person-to-person relationships between heads of states make diplomacy irrelevant. I do not believe that. On the contrary, and I think Capricia's books demonstrate why protocol and diplomacy are still very relevant nowadays. I am convinced, as Capricia, that protocol lays the groundwork for successful diplomacy, and successful diplomacy is the cornerstone of a civil rules-based world. Protocol, The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You, reminds us how critical these principles are, while providing a fascinating and heartwarming reading for anyone who wants to be empowered by the tools of diplomacy in work and everyday life. So welcome, Capricia. It's really an honor to have you here. And I would like to start with some specific questions, and then you can maybe answer them and just simply go on explaining some more issues regarding your book. You come from a very culturally diverse household. You have Croatian and Mexican origins. I was very moved by the description that you made of the funeral that you organized for your father in his town of origin. This cultural diverse origin is perhaps one of the biggest assets for someone that has facilitated dialogue and understanding among different cultures. Can you tell us a bit more about your background, about your Mexican origins? How did your personal experience coming from this diverse household, cultural diverse household, shape your work as social secretary and chief of protocol?
Well, first and foremost, Your Excellency, thank you so very much for inviting me into this conversation. I want to thank Nick also for that lovely introduction. You are profoundly one of the greatest ambassadors in the diplomatic corps. Mexico always sends the best, of course. But I must say that you have taken your position, the way that you have reached out to the US community, brought us into your country, taught us so much about not only the diverse culture, the fabulous food, but current day politics and the relationships that you have forged have been so incredibly important and have certainly confronted some challenging times of which you have diplomatically created win-wins on both sides of the border. So thank you so very much. I am so proud to be first generation American with a very rich Mexican background. My mother was born in Guadalajara, and my grandmother, of course, her mother was from there. We still have relatives there. And at a very young age, my grandmother was wed and had my mother, and then arrived to Cleveland, Ohio, and where of all places, and but it was where my grandfather's family had a very small basket weaving company. And so they set up household there, and my grandmother, barely knowing any English at all, raised 4 children, all pretty much on her own. She separated from my grandfather relatively later, but she was someone that I have had just immense respect for. She knew what she had to do in this country, how to become a part of the United States, getting a job on her own, having come from a family where she really wouldn't have had to work, and then raising 4 children in this new country, and then teaching all of us, her grandchildren, the richness of the country, of the culture, of the traditions. I was lucky enough that at a very early age, we moved actually into her home. And I lived with my grandmother for a period of time. My brother, my mother, my father, and I were enveloped into grandma's way of doing things. On Sunday mornings, if you were lucky enough, you were the one who was asked to stir the mole. And that was very, very important in the household. And you were the prized grandchild out of the 12 that she had, and to stir the mole. And then we would spend all day on Sunday making tortillas and a variety of other meals as a family. And I so looked forward to that time because I learned from my grandmother clearly, but also it was a time that the entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone came to grandma's tiny little house. And as a community, we learned so much about our ancestors and the culture of our family. And so, but not only was it the Mexican culture, as you point out, my father was from Croatia. He actually escaped from then communist Yugoslavia and made his way to Cleveland, Ohio, of all places. And my mother and my father met on a blind date. And throughout my childhood, they just infused into me the importance of difference, of diversity, of celebrating these differences, frankly, during a time in the United States when these differences weren't being celebrated, and to take to heart what did it mean to hail from these countries? What did my forefathers do? And I just invested that in my soul, and was so very lucky then to have had the opportunity by President Obama, when he named me as chief of protocol, to sort of release it all. And when I had the great privilege of working with the diplomatic corps, the foreign diplomatic corps, was like I returned home. I was back with my grandmother in my grandmother's home, because there were so many different languages, there were so many rich traditions, and again, celebrating those, shining. Now I had the wonderful opportunity of shining a bright light on the special, unique differences of every country, and it was the best part of my job, truly the best part of my job.
No, I really appreciate it, and I think your story is fantastic. I was just comparing. You said on Sunday you were maybe mixing the mole, stirring the mole. My grandmother was American on the other side. So my Sundays with her were dedicated to prepare pancakes. So you prepare mole with your Mexican grandmother, I prepare pancakes with my American grandmother. And that is really what cultural diversity is. And I was just comparing, and I was looking at the photographs that you have behind you, and I think one of them must be your grandmother.
No,
so,
that's my mama, mi mama.
You're asked to mama, which I have met. I have the privilege to meet. So these cultural diverse households are incredible to underline some of the areas that or some of the concepts that you write about in your book. And one of them is empathy and respect for the other. And when I was reading your book, I think all the time you always emphasize you have to show respect for the other, because this is a way that you also are respected. And you have to show empathy. And when you think of the US, which is the great superpower, and that other countries must be even afraid when they are organizing a visit of the US president to the country, or on the other hand, the heads of a state coming to the US, is how do we deal with this great superpower? I don't want to be overruled, so as a chief of protocol, and with this importance that you give to empathy, to respect, I really love the part of your book in which you were saying how you operated the visit. So what would be your main message on this respect, empathy, and dealing with other countries as a chief of protocol?
Well, I must say that you are emblematic of what I talk about in the book, in that it's really investing in these relationships. First, I worked hard with the team in the Office of Protocol, making sure that we did our homework. We learned everything about our visitor before they arrived. Had they had any previous connections with the United States? Did they perhaps study here? Were they posted here at an earlier time in their career? And then making sure then I conveyed that actually to the President and the Secretary of State as well. So they had information, perhaps that didn't come out in their normal briefings. Then in addition to that, it is creating, like I said, those special connections. Diplomacy is a long game. And it's so important for us to take the time to invest in these relationships, because it's the only way then that we create these bonds of trust. And in diplomacy, you must trust your counterpart. You must know that when they explain the way an event, a visit, a bilateral meeting will take place, is the actual way it will unfold, because you are there standing right before your president and leading them into this engagement. You want them to be fully prepared. You want them to understand the nuances, the differences that are going to take place in this country. And so I understood completely that when a leader landed at Andrews Air Force Base, and it was actually one of my favorite parts of the job, was to go out there and extend my hand and to say, on behalf of President Obama, I welcome you to the United States. I get a chill when I think about it. It's a great honor to have done that. And then to lead them through this visit. And I know at this time that there's some hesitations. There are some curiosities, perhaps there's even, some trepidation. And so you want to calm that. What our job was to make sure that the framework for that visit was welcoming, respectful, civil. There are going to be some difficult conversations as well, some interactions. Perhaps our leader may ask of the visiting leader a really difficult request. And so we want the tone, the tenor, the atmosphere to all have to be embraced by that welcoming atmosphere. And so creating and forging that relationship well in advance of that arrival is ultimately, I believe, one of the most important recipes to successful diplomacy.
So on the follow-up of what you were saying, setting the tone, the atmosphere for a visit is key. And I like very much what you wrote in your book, that you always went through with the specialists, with the advisors of the State Department, telling you what was the objective of the visit. Say either to concentrate on one issue, or if you had problems with what country and wanted to allay and resolve some problems, or to highlight, on the contrary, an advancement that was important. I think this is key, because a lot of people think that protocol, it's only superficial. And that it's only ceremonial, which is very important, but that it does not convey a message. And I think you reflect very well in your book that protocol should be used and is used to convey also a political message. And not just to create the circumstances, but to use protocol to have successful results, either in state-to-state relationship, in business, and even in personal to person relationship. So how would you say that in these changing times, these principles continue to be the key of protocol? I mean, to use protocol to reach very specific political objectives.
Oh, yes. Well, you point out so many wonderful points. You make so many wonderful points here, and you clearly have drawn out the best of the best of my book. There is an importance of how you utilize the various tools to your advantage. When I, of course, as I stated earlier, I want to be empathetic. I want to be understanding, welcoming, civil in all of our engagements. But in addition to that, while I'm creating a bridge in this relationship, I also need to persuade. And it is my duty in the office to put my president in the U.S. office, to put my president in the best position. And there's a variety of different tools that we used in which to do that. Once we did, when we did our research and we spoke to the desks at the State Department and clearly the NSC as to what is the goal of this event? Why is the president meeting with the perhaps president of Mexico on this occasion? And they relay those to us. We then go to work and we think about how can we still create that framework for diplomacy, but also pivot the power really in the direction of my president. How can I create this event so that slightly puts my president in the advantage when we think about the space, the room itself, Is it a large space, or will the conversation get swallowed up? Do I need for his counterpart really to come into some decision making? So I need to make that space smaller, and even height size of the room comes into effect.
Yeah, you mentioned.
What is on the table? What is the lighting in the room? The Secret Service, as we know, they like to block out all windows and lighting and everything. So we have to create an atmosphere as well there. What is the greeting like? What kind of mindset am I going to set, both for my president and for the counterpart when they arrive and their delegation? There are so many different tools, and soft power tools are really effective, from food to gifts to anything that is at our disposal that we can use that will, as Joe Nye, who coined the phrase soft power, says, it is a use, it's a power of attraction. Unlike hard power, we're not going to utilize any of our tools to go to war or economic sanctions. What we want to do is attract you into our way of thinking. We want to pull you in to creating, again, those trusting relationships, but also, here we have a differentiation of opinion, and we want to make sure that you are persuaded to come to our side of the ledger on these discussions. So there's so many elements, and as you point out, Your Excellency, nuances, micro details that go into all of the decisions for that one particular engagement, and with a hopeful conclusion that we've created now a collaboration between these two leaders so that they can come to a better relationship as they move forward in their global engagements.
Yes, I think this is one of the most relevant parts of the book, which I enjoyed very, very much. But you mentioned Mexico specifically, and in your book, you relate several experiences with Mexico. One, some of them in Los Cabos, when Mexico hosted the G20, which is a fabulous place. Some of them also of the visit of one former president of Mexico to Washington, and the visit, of course, of President Obama to Mexico. So we will have a big audience here of Mexicans and Mexican students of international relations. What do you remember most of all these experiences with Mexico?
Oh, my goodness. It would be so hard to pinpoint one, but I will say that first, the visits to Mexico, maravilla. I mean, Los Cabos is just exquisite. The locations, the manner in which my counterpart in Mexico, the Office of Protocol and the delegation there created the atmosphere in which they wove in the rich culture and traditions of Mexico into these very formal engagements. So even the path that the motorcade took, it would showcase some of the beauty of the country. So we got to really take that in. You turned convention centers into these like markets. It was so beautiful. I took pictures while I was there. I'm like, we have to do something similar to this. The beautiful bags that we received. It wasn't just a bag that a delegation received, but the bag itself was a beautiful symbol of the people and the work that took place there. And then everything, of course, that was within it as well, represented something. Everything that went into that engagement was intended to make a statement about Mexico. And I marveled at it. I took copious notes. I was really, really impressed. And then when we received delegations to the United States, always incredibly professional, well-informed, but just engaging. And we immediately created bonds of friendship. And those friendships then went into the hard work at hand. There was a lot of difficult discussions, as you know well, Your Excellency, on between the US and Mexico. We are friends, but we sometimes have issues with each other, and those had to be addressed at the bilateral table. But before we went into those, the setup of the meetings, the manner in which the delegation would arrive and ask the various questions, but being understanding that we're now in the United States and that some of the rules were going to be operating a little differently, was fascinating to me, and I think just assisted in helping our leaders really get through some of those challenging issues that they were addressing. The one visit that you note, the visit of President Calderon. Well, I was quite excited, as was my entire family in Cleveland, Ohio. Everybody is watching every moment of this visit, because there I am standing before President Obama, and at the state dinner that evening, it's my job to lead the president out onto the North Portico and take my position to the left and wait for the arrival of President Calderon and Mrs. Zavala's motorcade. And so I stood there and I was waiting, and just as I was about to take a step forward, my skinny high heel got stuck in a divot in the marble, and down I went. Now, thank goodness, I do a little exercise. So I helped myself and I jumped instead of falling forward. The president went to reach for me. Mrs. Obama said, "Oh no, don't take that picture," as the flash bulbs were going. The motorcade is now arriving. I stood up and looked around. I said I was okay, and then continued on without the president knowing anything that had gone on. I greeted him, brought him up, and thought, oh my goodness. It said, this visit just made me react in ways I never could have anticipated. And my poor mamita, she calls me immediately, "Are you okay?"
Yes. No, I was reading that anecdote, and but you, I mean, you managed very well, but it is something always to be remembered. And well, I wanted just to mention that when I said Cleveland, it caught my eye that your mother and your grandmother arrived to Cleveland, because most of the Mexicans migrating to the US arrived to California, Texas, Illinois, but not many as a first place to Cleveland. So that caught my attention. And then now that you were telling the story of the visit of President Calderon and what happened to you when you were receiving them, I would like to ask you, what was your proudest moment, and what was your most difficult moment, either as social secretary or as chief of protocol? Two antipodes.
Well, I think that there were, in both my posting as social secretary and as chief of protocol, one of my proudest moments was when I welcomed my parents first to the White House and introduced them to President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton in the White House. My father turned to me and he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "Never did I think that a man who came from Yugoslavia, Croatia, with $4 in his pocket and no education would have a daughter who would be working in the White House of the United States."
And very moving.
Just was incredible. There's my papi there. And then when I was sworn in as chief of protocol and standing on the stage with Secretary Clinton, raising my right hand, and there are my parents beaming up, my husband and my son holding the Bible, I could just feel the pride again from them, and the support and love from both my husband and my son. And I knew that I was representing something. I knew I was representing something bigger than myself, and that it was going out to the people that are from my family, from the countries that they represent, and taking this duty on. I was so filled with honor. So those are the proudest days that I had. And I would say the probably the most difficult. The most difficult days were, the departures are always tough. The arrivals are wonderful, but departures are difficult. But I would say that and I sobbed when I left the job on poor President Obama's shoulder. I think I nearly soaked him through on his jacket because I loved the position so much, but I knew my family really needed me. But I think that one of the more difficult days on that job was when we had to, when I had to greet the transfer of the remains of those Americans that came from Libya and from Benghazi, and to walk through President, the Vice President, the Secretary of State through this ceremony, this dignified ceremony, and be a bridge to the families who were attending that ceremony. It was a very tough day for everyone. And I knew that what we put in motion, what we set for the logistics, the formatting, was going to be ever so important, not only for what it represented to our country and for everyone who was watching it, but in particularly for those families. I was most concerned about the families. That was probably one of my most difficult days.
Yes, both of them very moving experiences, either the proudest moment and the most difficult one, and both of them related to people, to the feelings of people, to the family, and that is why people matters in every aspect of diplomacy. And talking about people, I know that other part of our audience will be young women that may look at us as, I hope, as a model to follow in a good way, not to be pretentious, but say, if one of them reached to be Social Secretary and Chief of Protocol, Ambassador Marshall, that we all respect, and the first female Mexican ambassador to the US, what advice would you give women seeking a career in diplomacy, particularly interested in protocol, but not only a career in diplomacy, but even women working in big corporate organizations in which they more and more need some protocol, some cultural awareness? What would be your main counsel for them? What you would advise them?
I dedicate, as you note, an entire chapter to negotiate about female, because even though the book is, of course, written for both men and women, I realize that being a woman in diplomacy is still a rarity, and we are not on equal footing yet. There's a wonderful picture that actually was taken in Los Cabos when we were at the summit of my one high heel shoe amongst a just sea of male loafers, and I cherish that photo that was taken by the wonderful Pete Souza, White House photographer. But in that chapter, I would say that one of we have to work harder. In everything that we do, we are always in a state of negotiation. Women are, and we have to always be on our game. We are in a time when we are trying to desperately make some of those transitions happen, but they are taking time in which to happen. I quote Madame Lagarde, former head of the IMF. Who said that during her time, she understood that she was the token woman, and we can shrug off tokenism. But she turned it to an advantage. She was always turning it to an advantage, that when you are the one woman who is asked to perhaps join a panel or be the moderator, instead of shirking it off because you know that they're asking you to join because you are a woman, embrace it. Let them know of your knowledge. Let them know that you can manage it and handle it, because then they will invite you back, and they will keep inviting you back. And what's so very important is getting into the room. Make sure that you get into the room. Figure out ways. You are also creating your own network. Men have been very, very good at this for a very long time and continue to be, and they've created these strong networks. Establish your own networks. And I would start with finding a great mentor, someone who is sitting on that branch higher than you on the tree, who is looking down over you, who is pulling you up when they see wonderful opportunities, who is helping you, giving you great judgment without being too judgmental or critical, who is guiding you. And, I was very lucky in my career to have had someone like Secretary Clinton, who often was looking after me and giving me great advice and guidance, but also looking for wonderful opportunities. She was the one who recommended me to President Obama for this posting. So that's another one. So early in your career, find a great mentor and make sure that they are established with what your desires are so that they know exactly what you're planning on doing, and be a great mentee, be somebody who is also invested in that relationship and in giving back and communicating well what your interests are. When you are brought into the room, don't delegate your power away. Make sure that you have a seat at the table. You can do that gracefully, elegantly. It happened to me on several occasions when I was actually, even by my counterparts, I was not even invited into the room, and learned that a meeting was happening and made my way over and just sort of casually walked in, took a seat. I was asked what I was doing there. And I said, well, I understand that this is a meeting of chiefs of protocol. And so I am here and I will be seated as well. And they said, well, and they didn't know what to do with me. Well, you have to get in the room sometimes, and without creating conflict, hopefully, you do that in a way that provides you the leverage that you need for your president, for your CEO, for yourself. And then if you can, try to make sure that you get an opportunity to make your way to the podium and make remarks. If you are the head of that delegation, if you're the head of the office representing, make sure that they know your position and that your power does not get diminished in those instances. Know the cultural norms of where you are traveling. You don't want to cause an offense in that country. Women still have many more cultural issues that they need to attend to than men do when they travel. So know them, but again, adhere to them without delegating your power away. Keep your footing. Know your position, know your goals that you have set forth so that you can achieve them in the most respectful way. Those are a few ways I think that women can these days elevate themselves by asserting themselves, because I think that what we all need to do is adopt an equalizing mindset. And when you adopt that equalizing mindset, it just puts you in that position of power.
I totally agree. I think your advice, I was taking notes. It's extremely, extremely valuable. I mean, we could exchange for hours anecdotes in which, simply people do not realize that the woman is the head of delegation, is the ambassador. No, I can tell you stories that when I arrived to a certain country and I would introduce myself, said, hello, I am Martha Barcena, the ambassador of Mexico. And the answer would be, when did your husband arrive as ambassador? I said, no, the ambassador, I am the ambassador. And they couldn't believe it. No, but I think your advice to young women, it's extremely important. The equalizing mindset is key. And I think the other woman that gave us a great lesson in this was former Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this is a figure that we all admire and that it's hard to follow, but she opened so many roads for us as you did as a chief of protocol, as I hope I'm doing for young women as a first female ambassador to the US. I could continue to talk about all the complexities of organizing meetings as G20, G7. These international conferences are fantastic, but are a nightmare. also a nightmare of challenges on protocol, particularly precedents that you talked a lot in your book, how important it is to respect precedents, to understand the sensibilities of different countries, the relevance of food, not only in bilateral relationships, but in multilateral encounters as G20, as the COPs. If you don't feed the people well, they will not deliver in negotiations.
No, they won't.
And they will be angry. And if the worst thing you can have is a hungry negotiator. That is terrible. We know that. So we could continue for hours, but we have already a short time. And I wanted to pose to you a last question. With we were having already a transition towards more technological infused relationships. But the pandemic left behind the life that we used to know, the personal interaction in many ways. And I don't know if we will return back to the way we interact before, or it will be a mixture, but the pandemic has forced us to move faster to this virtual reality and to adopt social distancing measures. How do traditional protocol practices adapt to this world where technology, video calls, text messages seem to have an increasing role that face-to-face interactions? Is protocol will continue to be so relevant, ceremonial? What is your perspective on this? You being the expert, what would you advise to the people, not only in government, but in business and this? I think this is one of the key challenges for the future. And I really would love to hear what is your view on this, Ambassador Marshall.
Well, as you know well, Your Excellency, that there is nothing that can replace the face-to-face. You immediately get a sense of the other person when you are negotiating with them, when you're meeting them for the first time, when you look into their eyes, get a sense of that person. So nothing will ever replace that. But now that we are within this framework that we find ourselves, their protocol is actually even more important. Protocol is all about preparation. Preparation is influencing. It is optimistic in the goals of your engagements. And so being prepared before you even turn that camera on, fulfilling the goals of whatever, if it is a bilateral meeting, if it is a client meeting, whatever it might be, you want to make sure that you are fully prepared. You've done all of your research about that engagement, because the second that camera clicks on now, we are full on with someone. They are seeing you and they're not distracted by the room that they're in. It is that which is on the screen right in front of them. And so you also want to be very aware of your background, most elegant, but it makes a statement as well. You know, you are the ambassador of Mexico with the flag and the symbolism of that. All of those details are incredibly important. Having a messy bed or, you know, dishes in the sink behind, not a good image and certainly not a good message. It states something about you that I think conveys a lot of weight in that imagery. So you want to make sure, and then once you do turn on the camera, make sure that you're doing introductions, that everyone does know this is the ambassador, this is the chief of mission, this is the deputy, whomever those people are, that they are well introduced. We have the opportunity of shaking hands and greeting one another. There's that formality when we have the face-to-face. Now the images just pop up. And there we all are. So who is who, and who am I supposed to be addressing, and how should this flow? Making sure that the agenda is quite clear in that engagement, so that nobody wants to be on a Zoom for a long period of time. You want to be able to get to those points relatively quickly. So you want to make sure that this is an agenda that you have created, drafted, that can be shared, and that everyone is following and abiding by. And of course, check your technology. Make sure that your technology is going to be working, whatever that platform is. Test it out well in advance, because you could be right in the middle of making that very important point, and boom, out goes knows you're wireless. So you don't want that to happen as well. So there are quite, oh, and then the follow-up. I would say that the follow-up is ever so important. You know, the camera turns off, now what? What are we going to be doing next? And making sure that everyone has those clear details, instructions of where this engagement will be going next. Because then once the camera turns off, we have to go back to our normal workday business. But we want to make sure that what we've accomplished in that 45 minutes really is a guide for us for future engagements with that individual, with the entity, organization, whomever it might be.
Oh, I think it really, I've been taking notes because it's really great. Get fully prepared, do the introductions, have a quite clear agenda, check your technology and do the follow-up. Very good advice that I think we all should follow up and put into practice. I really enjoyed this conversation with you, dear Capricia, Ambassador Marshall. I address you both as a friend and as a very relevant American diplomat, so distinguished. And I hope that everybody that listens to us will learn about the importance of protocol. And we learned a lot. I'm sure they will learn a lot from a wonderful woman that you are, and that you have served your country so well, and with moving stories, with very precise advice. And I will encourage everyone to really read the book. I mean, to have almost in every office of an embassy, a couple of books of protocol, and one of them this, it's always very useful. And when you have doubts, you can go with them, and then you can go to your friends if you still have doubts, as they do with you. And I really appreciate this time that you gave to us. We are going to share with all our audience and in Mexico this great conversation. And I hope that in the future, when times allows, you will be able to travel to Mexico Maravilloso again, and maybe go to some universities to present your books and engage with the students that will have a lot of learn to you, and even to the Diplomatic Academy in Mexico. I would hope so when due time comes. It has been a pleasure. It has been an honor. And I just want to say gracias. Muchas gracias.
Un millón de gracias a ti. My neighbor, my friend, and the wonderful representative of one of the most beautiful countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Adios.